What does it mean to test someone's manhood? Welcome to Strip Cover Lit, where we squeeze the bigger picture out of literature. I'm Adrian Ford, and we are here for a short story discussion, which will appear in two separate playlists here on the channel. Number one being the short story discussion playlist, and number two being the Ernest Hemingway read along. We are going short story by short story through the Finca Vigia edition of the complete short stories of Ernest Hemingway. We are here today to talk about 50 Grand by Ernest Hemingway. We will have a So What Happened recap of the short story, a literary criticism, and finally a writer's corner portion of the video. So, what happened? Jack, Soldier, and our narrator are at Hanley's and they are drinking with some women talking about boxing. Jack starts to go on an anti-Jewish tirade and then gets called out by one of the women. So the guys leave. They are in a fight camp for Jack defending his belt. And Soldier, as they are in this camp, the guy named Soldier starts to joke too much. Jack is kind of not feeling it. He's a little bit off. Soldier gets dismissed from the fight camp, and we are starting to feel or pick up on the fact that things aren't maybe necessarily going quite right for Jack. And he's not right because he says he misses his wife, and he's too old to have her come and see him, and he's not sleeping. It gets so bad that days before the fight, the boys are sure that Walcott will beat him. Chief among them, Jack himself is sure that Walcott will beat him, Walcott being the opponent. They tell him to stop working or he'll be stale for the fight. Later, John Collins shows up and he has a couple of guys with him. He shows up in the Irishman and says that the Irishman always looks bad before a fight. This is apparently his first camp at this certain location, but he assures everyone that the Irishman, Jack, always looks bad before he gets to the ring. But when John shows up, he brings a couple of those guys with him, and they end up talking to Jack alone. Then, after this talk, Jack's demeanor shifts negatively and he becomes very reflective on life and his career. He gets drunk that night and tells Jerry, our narrator, to bet on Walcott. He says that he's going to bet on Walcott. He's going to bet 50 grand on his opponent. Then, as we are questioning what those men said to Jack while they were alone, Jack says the fight is not cooked, but how could he win? Leading up to the fight, Jack seems relaxed and everything basically goes to plan from that point forward. Everything is relaxed, everything goes on time, everything he makes weight, all this stuff goes right down to the weigh-in, but in the ring, Jack ends up holding his own for the first few rounds. Shortly, though, Jack starts to fade. He knows he's going to lose, but he doesn't want to get stopped. He knows he's going to lose. He figures, I will do my best to lose on points rather than being knocked out or throwing in the towel. But it starts going even worse for Jack in the ring, and he's losing badly late. And while he's losing badly, Walcott hits him hard and obviously on purpose below the belt, something that would normally be disqualifying. But Jack says he's fine. He just needs a couple seconds to shake it off. He is granted that time, and he refuses to give up on the fight. Later, as they are sort of trading blows, Walcott receives a low blow from Jack on purpose. He gets DQ'd in the process as Walcott is unable to continue, and he loses his belt but wins the money. So what are we talking about in this short story? What is the literary merit to this story? Well, here's something that I thought was interesting because I think we've all been there before, right? As they are preparing for the fight, Jack says he can't sleep. And Jerry says, we'll take a long walk before you turn in. and get you good and tired so he can get a whole night's sleep. Tired, Jack says. I'm tired all the time. This is one of those things where probably you've been there in life, and it seems that what's going on is Jack is too tired to sleep. One of those strange things that happens when you are stressed out and you cannot come to terms with everything that's going on in your life. You become too tired to sleep. You get behind on sleep, and then when it becomes time to sleep, you lay there and think about all of the stuff that you're behind on, all of the things that are stressing you out, all of the reasons that you cannot sleep, and you just lay there getting even more tired for the next day. This is completely off the subject, but one of the things that I learned ends up happening to people who are on a weight loss journey is at some point you get too tired, you start amping yourself up on caffeine. And people who are trying to lose weight oftentimes are told, drink 8 ounces of water before bed. You will, A, be more hydrated. Probably you don't drink enough water. No matter who you are, you're supposed to get a half an ounce of water per body weight per day. So just take that into account. But also it helps you not eat as much the next morning. You are more full when you wake up. You feel satiated, at least when you wake up. But what happens to people is they've caffed themselves out of their mind. They drink that water. Caffeine, I guess, and this is something I've been told numerous times, it is what is called a crystalline structure, I guess. So it just floats in your bloodstream until your bloodstream can work it out. Well, one of the necessary agents to working it out is proper hydration, because that breaks the caffeine molecules down in your bloodstream. Well, what happens is these people who are on a weight loss journey end up caffeing themselves out of their mind, drink that 8 ounces of water before they go to bed, and then they're wide awake, making them even more tired for the next day, so they have to caff themselves out of their mind, and then they drink that 8 ounces of water before they go to sleep. Just an interesting tidbit there. On later in the short story, the next thing that we have to talk about is a Hemingway trope. As the men are meeting in the ring, Walcott seems to be quite the sport about it. Touching gloves, all of this stuff, putting his arm around Jack. Jack says, "So you're going to be one of these popular champions," Jack says to him. "Take your goddamn arm off my shoulder." So this is a Hemingway trope, the tough guy talk. Hey, we're not really all right. Why pretend to be? We're going to be in here throwing fists at each other's faces. I don't need your friendliness now. But the main thing to talk about in this short story, as far as I am concerned, is the primary irony that is on display here. Boxing, mano a mano, right? That is what they call it. A man-to-man fight, mano a mano. It is a test of one's manhood. My manliness versus your manliness. We will fight it out, and whoever is the most man will walk out of the ring. The irony here is that so Walcott had been set up to throw the fight. The Sharps that visited Jack had also, obviously, apparently, visited Walcott, and they got Walcott to agree to throw the fight. Now, early in the fight, it looked like he wouldn't have to throw it. Maybe he would lose the fight outright. But things started to turn, and you want to make it look good, right? So everyone kind of, the book was out on both of these fighters. Walcott could take a licking, and he could deal one. Jack was a champion. He was a hard hitter. So early in the fight, it was a real fight. Mid-rounds, it was a real fight. Walcott knew, hey, I can still throw some things. Jack's going to be a champion. He's not going to just keel over. That was what the Sharps were betting on. Then the Sharps told Walcott, you don't have to lose. Get disqualified. Hit Jack below the belt. Hit him in his manhood. Jack, being the real man here, was able to shrug off a low blow. and come back in the fight. Walcott, however, when dealt that same type of treatment, a punch to the groin, was unable to continue. His manhood was tested and failed. But because of the low blow, and because the low blow was dealt by Jack that stopped the fight, Jack was disqualified. So Jack gets to leave the ring with his manhood, although it was bruised, and winning $25,000. This is the real man prevailing. The man who was not going to simply throw the fight. Now, when the Sharps visited Jack, what was that private conversation? Was it that they tried to get Jack to throw the fight? They could not. And so they went to Walcott and said, hey, here's the plan. We'll give you X, Y, and Z. Just get DQ'd. You don't have to lose, but get DQ'd. The Sharps lose. The Sharps are not even in the ring. The Sharps are not the real man, according to Hemingway and all that Hemingway does. All that Hemingway asserts, all that Hemingway says, the entire case that Hemingway makes. Interesting in this that the irony of being not succumbing to a low blow and then dealing a low blow is the real test of the men involved in this fight. Now on to the writer's corner. This is, for Hemingway, a very long short story. This is 19 pages in standard print issue. And here's the maybe the true testament to the Hemingwayan genius. Does it feel like that much longer of a short story than other Ernest Hemingway short stories? I posit that it does not. We have a few different settings. Oftentimes in Hemingway short stories, you get one or two settings. Here, we get the bar, we get the camp, we get the city where the fight is taking place, we get the ring itself, and then we get the after. So we've got about 5 different settings here for Hemingway to take us through. But it doesn't feel longer than most Hemingway short stories because the real irony here is singular. It is the irony of the men who are testing manhood, exchanging low blows, and figuring out who's the real man. Jack able to continue, Walcott is not. His manhood is too sensitive for him to get up and continue the fight. The true testament to Hemingway's genius, therefore, would be that Hemingway is normally able to cram this much story into much fewer words, a much lesser word count. I don't think that it takes away from this story that there's a single irony here and that it is a longer short story. Maybe it's not the most exciting story, but it's fun enough, right? There's enough going on. All of that it becomes incumbent upon a writer when reading this story to look at their own word counts and say, am I just talking more and saying less? The last thing I think to talk about here, this short story, at least the first, if it's 19 pages, the first 15 pages are predominantly dialogue. Being predominantly dialogue, we get an entire story. We get a view into the seedy world of boxing. We get an introspection to Jack. We get the dynamic between Jack and Jerry. We get an entire character that is built up in Soldier, who's not in 80% of the short story. And most of this is done through dialogue alone. Now, the last 4 pages, because they are action, are much more involved in prose than dialogue. One of the tricks that Hemingway uses is this dialogue that is fast-paced, but you can read a character's intention through what they say without that intention being in their words. So we are left to question whether or not Jack is going to throw the fight until he tells us he's not going to. This builds depth of character for Jack. This builds intrigue into the story. This builds intrigue into what it was that the Sharps were doing there. But this is a short story that through most of the story is carried by the dialogue. If you want to learn how to write dialogue, read Ernest Hemingway and don't look at what is on the page. Look at what you can tell about the characters that is not told to you through prose. That is all I have for this short story discussion. If you like or appreciate what it is that I do here, hitting the like button really does help me out, as it tells YouTube to share this video with other literature lovers. If you find yourself here by chance but not design, there is literature on the channel all the time. Literature is the only thing I do here, and there is poetry every Monday. So consider hitting the subscribe button to stick around for more. And as always, I hope to have you back for the next one.